Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we really try to cut through the noise and deliver insights that truly matter. Today, we're tackling a question that I think weighs on a lot of minds. Why do some people, with pretty similar incomes, similar opportunities, end up building significant wealth, retiring, while others seem to struggle financially their whole lives? Is it just sheer luck, some kind of secret financial genius? Or, are they just smarter?
It is a fascinating question, isn't it? And as Morgan Housel explores so brilliantly in The Psychology of Money, the answer isn't really hidden in some complex spreadsheet or, market prediction. And it's much more fundamental than that. It's behavior. It's the psychology, how you think and act with money when things get tough, when temptation calls, or when fear really takes over. So our deep dive today is kind of designed to be a mirror, really, reflecting how your habits, your emotions, your upbringing, even your ego, and even pure luck, how all that shapes your financial life. Our mission for you listening is to help you understand why you make the money decisions you do, so you can take, genuine control.
That's a really powerful way to frame it. It reminds me, back in my college days, I used to park cars at this luxury hotel in LA. Saw every kind of wealthy person you could imagine. But there was this one tech executive who really stood out. He'd patented some key Wi-Fi component in his 20s, built and sold multiple companies, made millions. On paper, just a superstar. But he was completely, utterly reckless with money. He'd carry this massive wad of cash, like literally inches thick, flash it around, brag loudly. I remember once, just on a whim, he handed a staffer thousands of dollars for gold coins, and then he just gleefully skipped them across the Pacific Ocean like pebbles.
Wow, just skipping gold coins.
Yeah. And another time, he breaks this $500 lamp in the hotel restaurant, peels off $5,000 and just barks, "Here, take it and don't insult me." It looked like confidence, maybe. But looking back, it felt more like insecurity, just, cloaked in arrogance. Years later, I heard he went broke. And that story, for me, it just crystallized the central paradox. Raw brilliance doesn't automatically equal financial success.
No, it's a stark contrast, isn't it? And it highlights that core truth perfectly. Think about Ronald James Reed. He wasn't a CEO, not a Wall Street guy. He was a janitor from Vermont.
Yeah.
Worked at a gas station for 25 years, then swept floors at J.C. Penney for another 17. Lived incredibly simply, same modest house, his hobbies, chopping wood, fixing cars. But when he passed away at 92, people were absolutely stunned. He'd quietly amassed over $8 million, left a couple million to his family, $6 million to the local library and hospital. How? He just saved a little bit, consistently, invested in blue chip stocks, and waited for decades. That was it.
Wow. That's incredible patience.
Exactly. Now, contrast Reed with Richard Fuson, Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive, praised for his intellect. Fuson retired in his 40s, right?
Yeah.
But he went bankrupt in the 2008 crisis, lost his huge mansion, everything. He had every advantage, education, connections, market insight, but he was undone by, overconfidence and way too much leverage.
So looking at Reed and Fuson side by side,
Yeah.
what really separated them, it wasn't the smarts, clearly, not the pedigree, not even luck entirely.
Exactly. It was behavior. Reed showed incredible patience. Fuson, greed. Money doesn't reward brilliance in the way science or engineering might, It rewards discipline. Finance is, at its core, a mind game. It's not just a numbers game. And this deep dive, is going to unpack how money really intertwines with our psychology, our emotions, fears, dreams, even our identity. It's way more than just formulas and graphs.
Okay, so you've probably seen it, right? People making what just seem like baffling financial decisions. Maybe a friend who blew a huge bonus or a colleague taking some absolutely wild risks. And you think, are they crazy? But here's the really profound idea. Behind every single one of those choices, there's a story. There's a perfectly rational explanation to the person making it. We just don't see the world the same way. We don't live in the same reality sometimes. Like, I once saw this middle-aged guy earning barely above minimum wage buy a $10 scratch-off ticket. From the outside, it looks totally reckless, doesn't it? But for him, maybe that $10 was his only shot at hope that week. A tiny flicker of possibility.
That's so true. And money decisions, they're rarely made in the cold, hard light of a spreadsheet, are they? They happen in our living rooms, at the kitchen table, maybe lying awake at night. They carry this immense weight of our childhood memories, our adult fears. We're not just playing different games. Sometimes we're not even on the same field. Think about someone who grew up during the 2008 crash, saw their parents lose their home. For them, the stock market isn't some path to wealth. It's probably like a snake pit,
Yeah, terrifying.
Right. But someone born into, say, generational wealth, they might instinctively see risk as just opportunity. While someone raised on food stamps might view risk as the absolute beginning of loss, these people aren't crazy. They just carry different scars, right?
Yeah.
They're shaped by completely unique pasts. There were actually these researchers Ulrich Malmendier and Stefan Nagel, they found that our early life experiences like living through high inflation or seeing a huge stock market boom powerfully predict our future financial behavior. Whether we distrust bonds or become really aggressive investors, your choices aren't just logic. They're deeply tied to when and where you grew up and how those times made you feel.
That insight really humanizes all these financial arguments, doesn't it? Like when you challenge someone's investment strategy, you're not just questioning their math. You might be hitting on their identity, their sense of safety, maybe even their dreams. For a billionaire, buying lottery tickets seems completely foolish, right? But for someone struggling, well, those tickets might be the only hope they feel they have, however unlikely. And we're all just navigating this modern financial world, and let's be honest, it's pretty new for everyone. The 401k, only a few decades old. The Roth IRA is younger than Google. Index funds, credit cards, online trading. This whole system is relatively novel. We're all kind of learning as we go.
We're all first-generation learners in a way.
Exactly. And your personal experience with money, even if it's like 0.0001% of all global financial history, it still influences something like 80% of how you see the economy. It's massive. That's why someone who survived the dot-com crash might be absolutely terrified of tech stocks today, or why someone who got laid off during the pandemic now swears by having a huge emergency fund. So before you rush to judge someone's money choices, maybe just try asking yourself, what does the world look like through their eyes? What are they afraid of? What do they dream about? The goal isn't always to agree, right? But maybe just to understand. Okay, imagine standing on top of a mountain. You feel powerful, totally in control. But even up there are these unseen winds of fate blowing, right? Forces completely beyond your command. And that brings us to luck and risk. These silent, powerful siblings that shape our lives in really profound ways. Scott Galloway from NYU, he put it wisely, nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. And that's a truth that I think a lot of successful people tend to gloss over, and maybe many struggling people never really grasp. Take the Bill Gates story. 1968, he's just 13, attends Lakeside School. It was one of the only schools in the entire world with direct access to a computer back then.
Just incredible timing.
Right. And how did it happen? Some retired pilot convinced the school's mothers club to spend $3,000 from their rummage sale on this newfangled machine. That single 1 in a million moment of serendipity. Well, it laid the groundwork for Microsoft.
It's a perfect example. And what's so crucial to get here is that luck and risk,
Yeah.
they're two sides of the exact same coin. They're siblings, not opposites. Bill Gates had this other best friend, Ken Evans. Just as brilliant, just as ambitious, they coded together, dreamed big dreams. But Kent tragically died in a mountaineering accident before they even graduated.
Yeah.
That just highlights the other side of that coin, doesn't it? Risk.
Mm-hmm.
Gates and Evans, two extraordinary potentials, but the coin just landed differently for each of them. And this profound truth that you are never fully in control, it isn't a reason to panic. But it is a powerful argument for humility. It reminds us to stop assuming someone's success is all about skill or that someone's failure is all about stupidity. Sometimes the most brilliant people are just undone by a random gust of wind, and sometimes the reckless get carried along by a lucky breeze.
Yeah. The Nobel economist Robert Shiller pointed out how awkward it feels to admit luck played a part in your success. We much prefer these clean, simple stories. She's rich because she's brilliant. He's broke because he's lazy. But that's really deceptive, isn't it? Like, was Vanderbilt, who built railroads by basically breaking all the rules, brilliant or just reckless? If his empire had collapsed, history would call him reckless. Since it didn't, we call him bold.
Exactly. Hindsight bias is incredibly powerful.
Right. Same with Enron. Or think about Zuckerberg turning down Yahoo's billion-dollar offer back in the day. Was that genius? Or would we call him a fool today if Facebook had just imploded afterwards? Our judgment is so skewed by the outcome.
Precisely. And the core insight here, I think, is that these extreme stories, the billionaires or the bankrupts, they're often fueled by extreme levels of luck or risk. And because of that, you simply cannot copy them. It's not a reliable blueprint. If you're looking for real wisdom, look at the broad patterns, the probabilities, not just the flashy extreme headlines.
So practically speaking, what does this mean for you listening? Well, maybe cultivate humility about your successes and resilience when you face failure. When things are going great, recognize you're not invincible. Luck might be playing a role. And when life deals you a blow, don't just give up. You might just be on the wrong side of risk's dice roll at that moment. The real trick is just to stay in the game. Don't let one loss completely wipe you out. And don't let one big win make you blind to the risks ahead, because nothing is ever truly as good or as bad as it seems at first glance. Let me share a quick story that holds, I think, a really powerful lesson about your future. There was this glamorous party thrown by some hedge fund billionaire. Author Kurt Vonnegut turns to his friend Joseph Heller, the Catch-22 guy. Vonnegut says, "Our host probably made more money yesterday than you've made from your entire writing career." And Heller just smiles calmly and replies, "Yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough."
Wow. That one word, enough.
Right. It's like a jolt. It forces you to confront this fundamental question that so many people, maybe most people, spend their entire lives avoiding. When does more stop adding actual value and start becoming, well, dangerous?
Yeah.
A dangerous obsession.
And this really gets at what we might call the hidden disease of never having enough.
Mm.
We live in this culture that just screams for more, doesn't it? More money, more influence, more stuff. But more is this perpetually moving target. If you don't have a clear definition of what enough looks like for you, you risk stepping into the zone where logic just evaporates, where rational pursuit turns into, frankly, mad risk.
And we see this play out in real cautionary tales, not just philosophical ideas. Look at Raj Gupta. Clawed his way up from poverty in India to become CEO of McKinsey. With $100 million by 2008,
Yeah.
he could have lived 10 comfortable lifetimes on that money, easily. But Gupta wanted more. He wanted to be a billionaire. And that pursuit of more led him straight into insider trading on that Goldman Sachs Buffett deal and ultimately to prison.
Then there's Bernie Madoff. Before his name became, synonymous with the biggest Ponzi scheme ever, he was already incredibly successful. Ran this highly respected firm, pulling in tens of millions every year, rich, powerful, admired. But it just wasn't enough. That relentless hunger for more drove him to build this massive fraud that, when it inevitably collapsed in 2008, caused just biblical devastation, wiped out fortunes, shattered lives. And these weren't guys struggling to get by, right? These were already wealthy men gambling their entire lives, their reputations, their legacies, all for a more they absolutely didn't need. And it's not just about criminals. This is a really common human failing. We see it in legal boardrooms, in deals that look clean on the surface. We fall victim to this illusion of more, where our expectations just keep rising with our results. It makes true satisfaction feel impossible. It's like running a race where the finish line keeps moving further away. It leads to bigger risks, burnout, and this slow erosion of your values.
That dynamic really highlights modern capitalism's twin engines, doesn't it? Wealth creation on one side and envy on the other. Capitalism is amazing at making money, but it might be even better at making you want what other people have. This constant social comparison. It's just a happiness killer. Think about a rookie baseball player making, say, $500,000. That's a ton of money for most people, but he feels inadequate next to Mike Trout's $430 million contract. And Trout, maybe he compares himself to some hedge fund manager pulling down $340 million a year, who then looks at the guys making $770 million, and so on, right up to Jeff Bezos adding billions in a single year.
It's a treadmill, a deadly treadmill of social comparison, and you can absolutely never win that race. The only way to truly win is just to refuse to play the game.
That's exactly why enough is maybe the bravest word you can use in a world screaming more. It's not about settling for less. It's about sanity. It's about freeing yourself from that comparison trap. It's about protecting your wealth, sure, but also your values, your future, and maybe most importantly, your peace of mind. Most people, honestly, will earn enough to live well, to travel, own a home. But when you fail to define your enough, you unknowingly sign up for a game you just cannot win. So maybe take a moment, pause, and reflect. What does enough really look like for you? Are you chasing genuine joy or just shadows? Because true peace often begins the moment you decide to stop moving that goalpost. Okay, picture New York City buried under a mile of ice. Sounds dramatic, right? But it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't some sudden cataclysm. It started with something almost invisible, a slightly cooler summer, a thin layer of snow that just didn't quite melt. Nobody really noticed. But that leftover snow made it easier for the next winter's snow to stick around. And so the cycle began. Snow piled on snow, reflecting more sunlight, cooling the air just a tiny bit more, leading to even more snow sticking. Faster than anyone imagined, whole continents were frozen under these massive glaciers. A tiny whisper of cold gradually became this unstoppable avalanche of transformation. Now, what if building wealth worked exactly the same way?
It's a powerful analogy. Because what's really profound here is that wealth rarely arrives like an earthquake, boom, sudden riches. Instead, it creeps up on you like an ice age. It's not really about chasing those hot stock tips or the latest crypto craze. It's built through small, consistent investments. That's your snow that you just allow to accumulate and stick around for decades. That $50 you put aside this week, that automatic deposit to a low-cost index fund, that disciplined budget you stuck to, they don't feel thrilling right now, do they? But they are laying the groundwork for something incredibly powerful down the road.
The big challenge, though, is that our brains, well, They struggle to trust this slow, silent burn. We evolved to react to immediate danger, immediate reward. Saber-toothed tiger, run. Juicy berry, eat. But the most potent forces in the world, whether it's glaciers or fortunes, they tend to whisper, then roar, say.
Sure.
The real danger isn't that you'll fail spectacularly, it's that you'll just quit too soon, before you get to witness the miracle unfold. Think about this. If you consistently invested just $5 a day less than a fancy coffee and let it compound at a pretty reasonable 10% a year, in 40 years, you'd have over $800,000. There's no single big win there. No brilliant market timing, no magic formula, just know that stuck. And this leads us right into the Warren Buffett paradox, his incredible wealth. It's less a story of pure investing genius and much more a testament to the sheer power of time. Buffett started investing when he was 10 years old, but an absolutely astonishing $84.2 billion of his $84.5 billion net worth came after his 50th birthday, and $81.5 billion of that came after he turned 65. Most people are winding down at 50. Buffett was just getting warmed up, financially speaking.
This point is just so critical. Let's do a quick thought experiment. Imagine if Buffett had started investing at 30 and retired at 60. Even if he got the same amazing 22% annual returns, he'd end up with around $19 million. Now, that's not pocket change, obviously, but it's a staggering 99.9% less than his actual net worth. It's undeniably a time story. It's a compounding story. Even Jim Simons, the legendary mathematician, the hedge fund king, with those mind-boggling 66% annual returns, he only has about $21 billion, about a quarter of Buffett's fortune. Why? Mainly because he started investing later, around age 50. If Simons had started at 10, like Buffett, and compounded for 70 years at that rate, his wealth would be, well, the numbers are astronomical, quintillions. This proves a really chilling but also empowering point. Time is the most profoundly underrated multiplier in finance. Compounding is just deeply counterintuitive, isn't it? Our brains don't naturally grasp that simple addition, like 8 plus 8 plus 8, is nothing compared to exponential growth, like 8 to the power of 8 to the power of 8. We're constantly chasing intensity, higher returns, hotter stocks, instead of prioritizing duration, just sticking with it.
Think about data storage, how it evolved. From maybe 3.5 megabytes fitting in a huge room in the 50s to 100 terabytes on a tiny drive in 2019. For 40 years, it was just a whisper of progress. Then suddenly it screamed. Even Bill Gates, back in 2004, apparently underestimated how much storage Gmail would eventually offer. Compounding fools everyone initially. So the practical takeaway for you listening is really clear. You don't necessarily need to be a financial genius. You just need to be relentlessly consistent. You don't need to chase the absolute highest returns. You need reasonable returns that you can actually stick with for a very, very long time. Above all, you just need to endure. And here's the urgency, something you really can't afford to ignore. Every single day, you delay building your savings or investing or even just learning a new skill. That's a day that could have been quietly compounding for you. You won't feel the pain of inaction immediately. Compounding doesn't punish you short term. It just kind of ignores you until one day it either blesses you with incredible wealth or leaves you wondering where the time went, depending on the choices you made. Start your own ice age now. Okay, picture this. It's 1929. Wall Street is absolute chaos. You got two guys, Jesse Livermore and Abraham Garansky, both immensely rich, seemingly untouchable, yet only one of them, at least initially, managed to walk away with his fortune intact. Jesse Livermore, legendary market genius, he made the equivalent of over $3 billion in today's money in a single day as the world economy just cratered. But getting rich like that, it gave Jesse this feeling of invincibility. The money whispered these seductive lies, you're special, you can't lose, go bigger next time. And so he did, kept making bigger, riskier bets, until eventually he lost it all, ended up broke by 1933.
And then you had Abraham Garansky, a real estate mogul, built his empire methodically brick by brick. But he made the same critical mistake so many others did in the Roaring '20s. He confused a booming market with his own personal genius, thought he couldn't lose. When the market crashed, his over-leveraged empire just collapsed with it, gone. What a lot of financial stories miss is this crucial distinction. Getting wealthy often takes boldness, maybe even risk-taking. But staying wealthy, that demands humility. Both Livermore and Garansky were undeniably brilliant at making money, but neither had the emotional discipline needed to keep it. They mistook having wealth for wealth being permanent. Big difference.
Keeping money, it turns out, requires this totally different kind of intelligence, maybe a survival superpower. It means being, like Housel says, slightly paranoid, consistently cautious, and occasionally boring. It's about nurturing this mindset that constantly says, hang on, I might be wrong here. This good luck might not last. I need to prepare for what I can't see coming. That's the core frugality even when you have plenty, and humility even when you've had amazing success.
The graveyard of greatness is a really stark reminder of this. Every decade or so, roughly 20% of the names on the Forbes 400 list of richest Americans just vanish. Not because they died, but because they lost their fortunes. Getting money is one skill. Keeping it is a completely different game. It requires humility, a healthy dose of fear, and yeah, even a bit of paranoia. Michael Moritz, the billionaire mind behind Sequoia Capital, the legendary venture firm, he was once asked what made them last for decades while so many others failed. His answer was profound. He said, "We've always been afraid of going out of business. Not some grand vision, but a deep-seated fear of extinction." And Warren Buffett's real secret, it isn't just the brilliant things he did. It's maybe even more about the dumb things he didn't do. He didn't go bankrupt. He didn't panic sell during recessions. He didn't chase every hot, fast money trend. And he never, ever quit. His unwavering survival gave him the greatest gift an investor can have: time. Rick Guerin, part of the original Buffett-Munger investing trio. Just as smart, arguably, but he was apparently in a hurry. Leveraged up heavily, got hit with margin calls in the '73 downturn, forced to sell his Berkshire stock cheap. Great at getting rich, but couldn't stay rich. Nassim Taleb nails this. Having an edge and surviving are two different things. The first requires the second. You have to survive first. Avoid ruin at all costs. You don't have to win every single hand. You just have to stay in the game.
So the ultimate goal then, it seems, is to become financially unbreakable. Think about Buffett again during that terrifying 2008 crash. He wasn't panicking or selling. He was actually buying. Why could he do that? Because years before, he'd built this massive margin of safety. He promised himself and his shareholders that Berkshire would always have way more cash on hand than it needed. His absolute number one focus was survival, not just chasing flashy short-term returns.
And that perfectly highlights the hidden, often underappreciated power of just plain old cash. In a roaring bull market, holding cash feels like punishment, doesn't it? Everyone else seems to be getting richer faster. But when the inevitable crash comes, that boring, low-return cash transforms into an invaluable lifeboat. It lets you hold on to your investments instead of being forced to sell at the bottom. It keeps you calm when everyone else is panicking. And crucially, it buys you time. That measly 1% return on cash can actually translate into thousands of percentage points over the long run, simply by preventing you from making the single worst mistake: panic selling.
And what about this illusion of the perfect plan? We craft these beautiful spreadsheets, project these neat 7% annual returns, picture our dream beach house. But as we've all learned, life just doesn't care about your spreadsheet. The 2001 dot-com bust, 9/11, the 2008 crisis, the 2020 pandemic, none of those were scheduled nicely in anyone's 5-year plan, right? The truth is, good financial plans don't predict the future, they absorb the unexpected.
Right. The goal isn't perfect precision. It's unwavering resilience. A plan isn't valuable because it's perfectly accurate. It's valuable because it can survive being profoundly wrong. That's the whole point. That's the essence of your margin of safety. It's that buffer, that cushion, that turns potential chaos into just an inconvenience. It's asking yourself, okay, if the market only gives me 4% instead of 8%, am I still okay? Or if my income drops unexpectedly for a year, do I have enough of a cushion? Housel uses this great example of German tanks near Stalingrad in 1942. Apparently, they were sidelined by field mice chewing through the wiring insulation in their engines, a tiny, utterly unexpected detail causing catastrophic failure. Your financial plans need to account for those field mice, the things you can't possibly predict.
That's why you need what Housel calls a barbell mindset. You need to be both boldly optimistic about the long-term future, believing in human progress and innovation, but also deeply paranoid, preparing meticulously for immediate chaos. So I really urge you, rethink your financial plan. Build your finances more like a fortress, designed to withstand anything, not like a rocket built for just one perfect trajectory. Plan for the very real possibility that your plan will fail. Build in room for error, lots of it. Don't play games you simply cannot afford to lose, and never, ever bet the house. Okay, what if I told you you could be wrong 99% of the time? You could fail at project after project, make bad call after bad call, yet still end up achieving generational wealth and legendary status. Sounds completely impossible, doesn't it? But this is the astonishing power of what Housel calls tail events. Think about Walt Disney's studio back in the early 1930s. It was nearly broke. They'd made hundreds of animated shorts, and most of them lost money or barely broke even. Then came Snow White. Just one film, 83 minutes long. That single movie paid off every single debt the studio had and basically built the entire Disney empire we know today. That's a tail event. One rare outlier moment that completely rewrites the entire story.
And what's truly fascinating is how common this pattern actually is once you start looking for it. In venture capital, for example, the data shows roughly 65% of VC investments actually lose money. They fail. Yet, just 0.5%, half of 1%, of those investments deliver 50x returns or more. And those few massive wins make the entire high-risk game worthwhile. Or look at the broad stock market, the Russell 3000 index. From 1980 onwards, a staggering 40% of all public companies in that index lost 70% or more of their value and basically never recovered. Dead money. But the entire 73-fold increase of the index over that period, it came from just 7% of the companies. Giants like Microsoft, Walmart, Apple, Amazon. And even within those giants, the real value was often driven by even narrower wins. These tail products like the iPhone or Amazon Prime or AWS. Each one a billion-dollar swing, often built on the graveyard of less successful experiments. There's the story of Heinz Bergerwin, a quiet student who escaped Nazi Germany. He later became one of the world's most legendary art collectors. He sold works by Picasso, Braque for over $100 billion, but the true value of his collection was estimated at over $1 billion. He didn't need to be right every single time about every single painting he bought. He just played the odds, understood the power of the tale, and let those few extraordinary masterpieces dominate his success.
This profound wisdom, the wisdom of surviving all the wrong calls, is absolutely critical. Being wrong most of the time. It's not just possible, it's completely normal in finance, in entrepreneurship, in life itself. We tend to overreact to failure, don't we? Give up way too early. Peter Lynch, one of the greatest investors ever, famously said, if you're terrific in this business, you're right 6 times out of 10. 6 out of 10. That's considered terrific. Jeff Bezos understood this instinctively. When the Amazon Fire Phone was this huge public flop, he basically shrugged and said something like, if you think that's a big failure, we're working on much bigger failures right now. He knew that one massive win, like Amazon Web Services, could easily pay for 1,000 misfires.
Reed Hastings at Netflix had a similar mindset. He once remarked, our hit ratio is too high, we need to take more risks. For these kinds of leaders, failure isn't a bug in the system. It's a fundamental feature of innovation and growth. You have to risk failure to get the big wins. Think about a Chris Rock comedy special on Netflix. It looks so polished, so perfect, but it's built on dozens, maybe hundreds, of rough nights in small clubs where jokes just bombed. You need the flops to find the hits. Even Warren Buffett, across his 400 or 500 investments over his lifetime, 90% of his entire wealth came from just 10 of them. 10. His partner Charlie Munger put it even more bluntly. Remove a few of Berkshire's top investments and its track record is just average. George Soros maybe captured it best. It's not whether you're right or wrong that's important, but how much money you make when you're right and how little you lose when you're wrong.
So the practical application for you listening is this. Don't wait for the mythical perfect plan. Just start trying things. Take those shots. Launch the side business. Send the pitch email. Make that first investment. Most of them will probably fail or fizzle out. That's okay. The tail is waiting. You just need to keep swinging the bat.
Housel uses this great historical analogy. Imagine 3 investors starting in 1900, investing until 2019. Sue invests $1 every single month, faithfully, no matter what the market's doing. She ends up with $435,551. Jim, though, he's nervous. He only invests when the economy is not in recession. He ends up with $257,386. Tom is even more cautious. He waits 6 months after a recession ends before he starts investing again. He gets $234,476. Sue's genius wasn't timing the market or picking winners. Her genius was just staying average and consistently staying in the game. She let those powerful tail events do their work over time. Napoleon apparently said, a military genius is the man who can do the average thing when all those around him are going crazy. That quite often is the real secret to financial success too, just doing the sensible thing consistently.
I can do whatever I want today. That simple thought right there. Housel argues that's the very essence of true wealth. We're often conditioned to equate wealth with, the flashy stuff. Fast cars, huge houses, exotic vacations. But the real flex, the ultimate sign of wealth, it's waking up with the profound freedom to choose how you spend your day. Not necessarily because you're formally retired, but because you're genuinely in control. Control of your time, your decisions, your life.
And psychological research overwhelmingly backs this up. There was this renowned psychologist, Angus Campbell. He found that having a strong sense of control over your own life is a far more reliable predictor of happiness and well-being than any objective measure, like your income, the size of your house, or your job title. It's less about how much you earn and more about the degree of autonomy you actually have.
And tragically, for so many people, that sense of control is just missing. It leads to immense anxiety, this pervasive feeling of helplessness. It's that silent burden of feeling trapped in a toxic job you hate, or maybe staying in a relationship purely out of financial necessity because you can't afford to leave. Even having just 6 months of emergency savings, that can provide an incredible surge of power and freedom, the ability to say no. I vividly remember my investment banking internship back in the day, 100-hour work weeks, zero control over my time. And even though the work itself was intellectually stimulating, that sheer lack of autonomy turned it into a nightmare. I learned a really painful but critical truth then. Doing something you love on a schedule you hate feels no different than doing something you despise. Control matters immensely.
The story of Derek Sivers, the entrepreneur, illustrates this beautifully. By the time he was 22, he'd meticulously saved up $12,000. That small amount allowed him to quit his job and pursue his passion as a full-time musician. Years later, he sold his company, CD Baby, for millions. But he often said he didn't truly feel rich when he sold the company. He felt rich the day he saved enough to take control of his time, way back when he had just $12,000. So freedom isn't necessarily about having boundless abundance. It's fundamentally about having enough to control your choices.
This insight also brings us to what Housel calls the man in the car paradox. Back when I was a valet, I'd often find myself admiring the Ferraris, the Lamborghinis, but I wasn't really admiring the drivers. I was imagining myself driving those cars. We often chase wealth believing it will automatically earn us admiration from others, but the humbling truth is most people don't admire you for your wealth. They just use your wealth as a benchmark for their own desires. They imagine themselves in your shoes. Real admiration, I think, is earned through character, humility, kindness, authenticity, qualities you just can't buy.
And this leads directly to the idea of the invisible millionaire. True wealth is so often what you don't see. The person driving that flashy Ferrari. All you know for sure is that they once had enough money to buy that car, or maybe lease it. You have no idea if they have anything left over, or if they're drowning in debt. Rihanna, the global superstar, apparently nearly went bankrupt at one point because of excessive spending. Most people don't genuinely want to be a millionaire with all the discipline it requires. They just want to spend $1 million, which is, ironically, the fastest way not to become wealthy. Being rich is often about visible income, flashy displays. Wealth, however, wealth is silent. It's savings, it's restraint. It's the Porsche you didn't buy, the Rolex you left in the display case. It represents peace of mind, options, a buffer against life's chaos.
Ronald Reed, the janitor we talked about earlier, who lived modestly and died with $8 million. He's the ultimate invisible financial role model, isn't he? Nobody saw his wealth while he was alive, so nobody admired him for it. But that wealth quietly gave him immense freedom and dignity in his later years. So the practical application for you is clear. You don't necessarily need millions to feel truly rich. You just need enough to buy your freedom. Every single dollar you save, every conscious decision you make to reduce your dependence on a paycheck. That's a tangible step toward truly owning your life. So, reframe your understanding of wealth. Don't just passively wait until retirement to reclaim your time. True wealth isn't measured in dollars on a statement. It's measured in peace of mind. And peace often begins the moment you stop moving that goalpost. Stop chasing what others have. Start appreciating what you already possess. Let me take you back to the 1970s oil crisis for a second. Remember that. The world was convinced we were running out of oil. Panic everywhere. Yet the predicted collapse never actually happened. Why not? Not because we magically found vast new oceans of oil. It was because we collectively got smarter. Cars became more fuel efficient. Factories wasted less energy. We survived by needing less, not by endlessly finding more. Now think about your own life like that 1970s world. You're earning. You're spending. But sooner or later, you're going to face your own personal energy crisis. A sudden layoff, maybe an unexpected medical bill, a dream that stays just out of reach because you couldn't afford to say yes when the opportunity knocked. You won't navigate those tough times by frantically trying to earn more. You'll navigate them by needing less. That's why saving money isn't just some smart financial habit. Housel argues it's an urgent, quiet superpower. It's your armor against the unpredictable, a silent force building behind you.
Yeah, and what's really essential here is realizing that the single most powerful wealth-building tool you have isn't necessarily a sky-high income or finding the next hot investment. It is, quite simply, your savings rate, that straightforward gap between what you earn and what you actually manage to keep. And that critical element is entirely within your control. Unlike the volatile, unpredictable returns of the stock market, right? People often obsess over chasing an extra 0.1% in investment gains, yet they completely ignore maybe 30% of their paycheck, just quietly vanishing into, well, let's call it lifestyle fluff. Unnecessary spending. You don't always need to earn more. Often you just need to want less.
Which is incredibly hard, isn't it? In a world that's constantly screaming at you to prove your worth through what you own. Bigger car, fancier kitchen, that vacation designed purely for Instagram. But remember, genuine wealth isn't what people see. It's precisely what you don't spend. So why is saving money, even without a specific goal, like a house deposit or retirement, why is it actually a profound form of wisdom? Because savings aren't just about affording tangible things. They're fundamentally about affording options. The option to walk away from a toxic job, the capacity to care for sick parents without financial panic, the agility to seize unexpected, life-changing opportunities when they appear. Life, as we know, doesn't conveniently schedule its emergencies or its big breaks on our calendar.
Exactly. The return you get on just holding cash in the bank, the ability it gives you to, say, switch careers at 45 or take a much-needed sabbatical at 35, that return is truly incalculable in percentages. Its value is measured in this priceless currency of peace, personal power, and possibility. In our hyper-connected, constantly changing world, flexibility has become the new intelligence. Being financially unburdened, being able to patiently wait for the right moment, that's a critical, enduring edge.
And there's this constant battle, isn't there, between our ego and our financial security. The vast majority are overspending. It's not driven by practical need. It's driven by ego, for show, for peacocking, as Housel calls it. It's insecurity wrapped up in luxury goods.
But true savings, they're quiet, they're invisible, they're inherently humble. If you think about savings as simply the gap between your ego and your actual income, well, you suddenly understand why so many high earners are perpetually broke and why so many quiet, unassuming people are actually truly free.
So the call to action is unequivocally clear. Save now, not someday. Save for the inevitable surprises. Save for the unparalleled freedom it buys you. Save for those metaphorical field mice you simply cannot predict. Every single dollar you diligently save today buys you a little more time, a little more choice, and a little more precious control in a world that's constantly trying to take it all away. Okay, imagine this scenario. A 28-year-old just got promoted, finally making their first serious investments. They've read all the financial blogs, run all the numbers meticulously on spreadsheets, and they are absolutely determined to be purely rational. No emotion allowed. They pick the mathematically optimal strategy, fine-tune the portfolio, rebalance perfectly every quarter, avoid emotion like it's financial poison. Then the market crashes. Hard. Their portfolio turns into this sea of red, their hands start to tremble, their stomach knots up, they're staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., just haunted by the terrifying thought of losing everything. And that perfectly calculated spreadsheet, it offers zero comfort, it doesn't whisper back any reassurance, does it? Let me tell you a fundamental truth we often try to ignore. You are not a machine. You are a messy, emotional, hopeful, and incredibly resilient human being. And crucially, that's not a weakness. Housel argues it's your distinct advantage if you understand how to use it.
Yeah, what's truly insightful here is how often human reason triumphs in situations where pure, cold logic might completely fail. There's this story from the early 1900s about a psychiatrist named Julius Wagner-Jauregg. He tried something that seemed utterly outrageous at the time. He injected syphilis patients with malaria. Deliberately, he was leveraging the irrational high fevers caused by malaria to actually cure the syphilis, and he eventually won a Nobel Prize for it. His decision wasn't guided by cold, conventional logic alone. It was driven by a deep sense of reason, keen observation, pattern recognition, and maybe strong gut instinct. He wanted to help people live, even if his methods initially defied all the textbooks.
Pain just fundamentally changes the equation, doesn't it? Like, our bodies naturally generate fevers to fight infection. That's the rational biological response. Yet we instinctively fight those fevers with medicine because they make us feel awful. We chase bearable solutions, not always the technically optimal ones. The exact same dynamic plays out with money. The purely rational choice might be invest aggressively, ride out the market lows bravely. But when reality hits, when your life savings are bleeding value, those elegant pie charts suddenly feel like cruel jokes. In that moment of genuine distress, practical reason matters infinitely more than abstract logic. Can you actually stick with the plan?
This brings us to Harry Markowitz. The esteemed father of modern portfolio theory won a Nobel Prize for his groundbreaking work on the optimal balance between risk and return, the definition of rational finance. Yet, when asked how he personally invested his own money, he famously replied something like, "I visualized my grief if the stock market went way up and I wasn't in it, or if it went way down and I was completely in it. So I split my contributions 50-50 between stocks and bonds." And pawn. That wasn't just mathematical calculation talking. That was raw human emotion. That was humanity. And crucially, that was perfectly okay, even for the king of rational investing. Because what matters most isn't devising the theoretically perfect financial plan on paper. It's having a plan that you can realistically stick with when things inevitably get hard. Strictly rational strategies often fail precisely because they ignore the powerful force of human emotion. Reasonable strategies, on the other hand, are designed for resilience. They bend gracefully, but crucially, they don't break under pressure.
I'd even suggest maybe controversially, that you should strive to kind of love what you own financially, not with blind faith, obviously, but with a genuine emotional connection. If you're truly passionate about a company's mission or a fund strategy, if it deeply aligns with your values, you're significantly more likely to stay committed during the inevitable downturns. It's less about squeezing out every last penny of return and more about having the psychological fortitude to endure the storms without panicking or abandoning your long-term strategy. So here's the ultimate call to action on this point. Rational is for robots. Reasonable is for survivors. Don't waste your energy trying to be purely rational all the time. Instead, strive to be profoundly reasonable. That ultimately is how you stay in the game. Because reasonable will almost always be purely rational when human emotions get involved, which they always do. Okay, picture this. Spring 2008. A guy named Alan retires after 35 years of diligently saving, prudently investing. He'd read every financial paper, meticulously tracked charts, could quote Warren Buffett chapter and verse. He genuinely believed he was completely prepared. Then the market crashed, hard. Alan lost 40% of his entire portfolio in just 6 short months. What stunned him the most, he said later, it wasn't the numbers on the screen, it was the profound, paralyzing fear. Nothing he had ever studied in all those history books had prepared him for the gut-wrenching feeling of watching his life's work seemingly vanish overnight. And his experience exposed one of the greatest deceptions in finance, this illusion that if you just understand the past perfectly, you can reliably predict the future. You can't.
Yeah, the Stanford professor Scott Sagan put it perfectly. Things that have never happened before happen all the time. History, especially in finance, is more like a memoir of past chaos, not a reliable roadmap for the future. The brilliant physicist Richard Feynman once joked, "Imagine how much harder physics would be if electrons had feelings." Well, guess what? Investors collectively possess millions upon millions of feelings. That makes forecasting the market feel way more like trying to predict the next plot twist in some intricate mystery novel than like solving a physics problem. In science, history often reveals underlying structure. But in finance, history is merely suggestion. Every single market cycle is fundamentally written by a new generation, using new tools, grappling with new fears. It's never the exact same story twice. Blindly copying tactics that worked in the past in this dynamic environment? It's not just dangerous, it can be fatal. The investor Michael Batnick highlighted this perfectly when asked about rising interest rates recently. He basically said, nobody knows if they'll behave in the same predictable way they have in past cycles. The context is always different.
Because the world, you see, it really operates on outliers, these unexpected shocks. Consider Gavrilo Princip back in 1914. He steps out of a coffee shop after grabbing a sandwich, happens to see Archduke Franz Ferdinand's car, and assassinates him. That single, seemingly small tail event, a sandwich break, unexpectedly ignited World War I, which then directly led to World War II, the Cold War, the space race, and ultimately the GPS technology that's probably in your phone right now. The most significant forces shaping our lives are often these explosive, profoundly rare, and utterly unpredictable outliers. The market doesn't crash because you missed some minor headline in the news. It crashes because something truly unimaginable happened. Take 9/11, for example. That single event triggered this whole chain reaction. Aggressive Fed rate cuts, which helped fuel a housing boom and then a bust, which ultimately contributed to the student debt crisis. All cascading from one single devastating outlier event.
Nassim Taleb underscores this crucial point brilliantly. He says, the worst event like a market crash or a pandemic has no precedent. That's why it's the worst. Highway. We build nuclear reactors based on the worst earthquake we've ever seen. We plan our financial portfolios based on the worst market crashes we've previously survived. But this approach often leads to what Taleb calls risk blindness. We're planning based on past worst-case scenarios, rather than preparing for what is genuinely possible in the future, things we haven't even conceived of yet.
And this inherent unpredictability highlights exactly why that famous phrase, "this time is different," actually holds a lot of truth, and why it matters so much. Think about it. The 401k is only middle-aged. The Roth IRA is younger than Google. The vast majority of the financial tools and instruments we use today simply didn't exist for most of human history. Phil Knight, founding Nike back in the day, he financed it in a completely different universe than today's venture capital firms operate in. The very makeup of the S&P 500 has changed dramatically. It used to be industrials. Now it's heavily dominated by financial and tech stocks. Even recessions, while maybe less frequent overall, are often far more volatile and globally interconnected when they do hit.
Benjamin Graham, widely revered as the godfather of value investing, the author of The Intelligent Investor. He constantly revised and rewrote his foundational formulas throughout his career. He understood intuitively that the old rules sometimes stop working. He'd basically say, those strategies don't work anymore. These seem to work now.
Yeah.
There wasn't a sign of weakness or inconsistency. That was the ultimate testament to his survival instinct and his adaptability. He knew things changed.
So the message here is really about embracing profound humility. History should be your teacher, absolutely, but never your fortune teller. Resilience will always be prediction in the long run. Adaptability is your single greatest weapon. Stop fixating solely on, well, what happened before, and start asking, maybe more importantly, what haven't we even dared to imagine yet? Because the world doesn't truly operate on predictable averages. It runs on those disruptive, game-changing outliers. This time is different. It always is in some crucial ways. So don't try to drive through a raging thunderstorm using only your rearview mirror. I grew up with this friend who was just absolutely laser focused on becoming a doctor, studied nonstop, worked double shifts to pay for it, just bulldozed his way through every single obstacle. Eventually, maybe a decade older than most of his classmates, he achieved his dream, got the MD. It really should have been this fairy tale ending, right? All that hard work paid off. But when I reconnected with him years later, he just confided it's an awful career. The relentless stress, the grueling hours, the soul-crushing bureaucracy, it had completely broken the man who once fought so fiercely for that very dream. And this reveals a really profound truth that most of us tend to ignore. You will change, not just in minor ways, not just your circumstances will change, but the very core of who you are will evolve over time.
Yeah, psychologists actually have a name for this. The end of history illusion. It's this deeply ingrained belief we all seem to have. We can clearly see how much we've transformed in the past, our tastes, our beliefs, our priorities. But somehow we believe we've reached our final, immutable form right now. That the person we are today is the person we'll be forever. But you haven't, and you won't. Daniel Gilbert, the brilliant psychologist who wrote Stumbling on Happiness, put it beautifully. He said something like, young people paid good money to get tattoos removed that teenagers paid good money to get. Middle-aged people rush to divorce people who young adults rush to marry. Change isn't the enemy here. Your stubborn refusal to admit that you have changed. That's the real hazard.
And this highlights the inherent danger of trying to construct a life, especially financial life, that's set rigidly in stone. Our desires, our values, our priorities. They're in constant flux. A 5-year-old might dream of driving a big green tractor. At 25, that same person might aspire to be a high-powered lawyer in the city. Then, at 35, they realize they never see their kids, and suddenly flexibility becomes their top priority. Then, maybe at 70, they face the harsh reality of being unprepared for retirement because the financial plan they met at 35 didn't account for living longer or wanting different things. None of this is necessarily a series of mistakes. It's just life unfolding. Change is the constant. Regret tends to fester when you stubbornly refuse to adapt your financial life in sync with your personal evolution. People often feel utterly trapped when they succeed at achieving something that, over time, just no longer fulfills them. So how do you build a financial plan in a world where you yourself are constantly changing? The answer, as it suggests, lies in prioritizing balance and flexibility over rigid, pinpoint precision. First, actively try to avoid extremes. Don't base your entire financial future on living with the absolute bare minimum, nor on some relentless high-income grind that guarantees burnout. Find a sustainable middle ground. Second, aim to compound moderately so you can endure massively. Create a balanced, sustainable lifestyle that doesn't require heroic effort, ensuring you have the staying power for the long, long haul. Third, learn to let go of sunk costs. Clinging desperately to a financial plan you meticulously crafted when you were an entirely different person. That's like letting a stranger dictate your present life. Have the courage to kill bad plans, old dreams that no longer fit, without feeling guilty about the time or money already spent. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel laureate, was apparently famous for rewriting entire chapters of his books from scratch, even after weeks of hard work. When asked how he could just discard all that effort, he reportedly said, "I have no sunk costs. Just move forward."
That's a powerful mindset, isn't it? No sunk costs.
It really is. You will change. Your career path might take unexpected turns. Your family situation, your health, your core values, your deepest passions, they will all evolve. But if you intentionally construct your financial life to bend gracefully without breaking, if you cultivate the ability to adapt without debilitating regret, you grant yourself something incredibly rare and precious, the profound freedom to continually become whoever you are authentically meant to be next. Your finances should support your evolution, not trap you in your past self. We live in a world just captivated by this illusion of ease, don't we? Free shipping, no money down offers, make 6 figures working from your couch. But let's be absolutely crystal clear about something. Nothing in life is truly free. Not success, not genuine security, not even basic survival. Everything, unequivocally, has a price. And tragically, that price is rarely printed neatly on a label. It often comes due silently, insidiously, maybe years after the initial decision, when you're already too deeply committed to the game to easily back out. By then, you're either prepared to pay that steep cost, or you find yourself paying with the bitter currency of regret. Think about General Electric, GE, once this $300 billion titan of American capitalism. In 2004, it seemed like the epitome of stability and power. But behind that glittering facade, its massive financing division, GE Capital, which accounted for over half its profits, it was this complex, delicate, interconnected machine. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, that engine just catastrophically cracked. What followed was brutal. A staggering collapse, billions in losses, a stock price that plummeted from around $40 to just $7. The CEO at the time, Jeff Immelt, later shared this haunting truth with his successor. He said, "Every job looks easy when you're not the one doing it."
Wow. That story perfectly illustrates this crucial insight, doesn't it? Genuine success always demands a price. It asks for your time, often your peace of mind, sometimes your pride. It demands sleepless nights, moments where your confidence is shattered, agonizingly difficult decisions. The true cost is often invisible until the bill is severely overdue. And the high price of wealth, particularly the immense emotional cost of achieving high investment returns, is something rarely discussed openly. Okay, let's say you consistently invested in the S&P 500 index for 50 years. You can multiply your money 119-fold. Sounds amazing. Sounds easy on paper. But what does that journey actually feel like during the inevitable downturns? When your portfolio is plunging and every single headline is screaming about recession or market collapse, it feels like debilitating fear, gnawing doubt, suffocating uncertainty, profound regret, maybe even panic. The brutal truth is, the real cost of generating great long-term returns isn't measured in dollars. It's paid in relentless anxiety, countless sleepless nights, and the sheer mental fortitude required to endure sustained periods of chaos. Everyone wants that impressive 11% average annual return, right? But almost nobody wants to voluntarily sign up for the gut-wrenching emotional roller coaster that comes with it.
People are constantly trying to steal those returns without paying the price, aren't they? Through ill-fated attempts at market timing, or frantically trying to avoid all volatility, or arrogantly believing they can outsmart every single recession. Housel compares it to trying to steal a Ferrari and naively expecting to live a life free and clear of any consequences. It doesn't work that way. Look at Netflix. Delivered those truly massive returns, over 35,000% between 2002 and 2018. Incredible. Yet during that same period, its stock traded below its previous all-time high on an astonishing 94% of all trading days. 94%. Similarly, Monster Beverage, the energy drink company, generated an insane 319,000% return over 23 years. But its stock was underwater, below its prior peak, on 95% of those trading days. This persistent, often gut-wrenching volatility. It isn't a bug. It's the fundamental price of admission you have to pay for those potential long-term gains.
There was a Morningstar study that rigorously tracked 112 of these tactical mutual funds, the ones that supposedly cleverly dodge market declines. During the tumultuous period of 2010-2011, guess how many actually managed to outperform a simple, boring, passively managed 60-40 fund? 60% stocks, 40% bonds. Only 9. 9 out of 112. And the vast majority of individual investors actually earn less than the very funds they invest in. Why? Because they don't have the discipline to stay put. They try to time the market, reacting emotionally to dips, missing out on the eventual recoveries. The illusion of safety, often created by financial giants like GE before its fall, or Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, eventually crumbles under pressure. The harsh reality is, no one truly escapes paying the price in the end. Something always gives.
Housel uses this great analogy, the Disneyland illusion. People happily shell out $100, maybe $150 or more now, for a day at Disneyland. They see it as a reasonable fee for the magic, the fun, the cherished memories. Yet those same people often recoil in horror at temporary dips in their investment portfolio. They view those dips as an unfair fine, or some kind of personal punishment from the market gods.
The key insight here is truly transformative. Market volatility is not a punishment. It is unequivocally the ticket. It's the unavoidable price of admission. The market is simply asking you every time it drops, are you really willing to ride this ride to get the potential reward at the end?
So here's your call to action. If you perceive market volatility as a punitive fine, you will inevitably run scared, often at precisely the worst possible moment. But if you can reframe it, see it as a necessary fee, the cost of entry for potentially higher long-term returns, then you position yourself to win. Try to reframe that fear as simply an investment in future progress. Because genuine wealth doesn't accrue to those who frantically try to avoid all pain. It accrues to those who are brave enough and patient enough to endure it. The market doesn't reward timing brilliance nearly as much as it rewards unwavering resilience. Okay, cast your mind back again. The dot-com bubble bursting. A staggering $6.2 trillion in household wealth just evaporated. Poof. Or the 2008 housing crisis. Another $8 trillion gone. We like to think we're rational, don't we? That these huge collapses are always caused by someone else's greed, someone else's foolish mistake. Not me. But financial bubbles form precisely because people start taking their cues from others without ever realizing they're not even playing the same game. They're following signals meant for players with totally different goals and timelines.
It's a great point. You would never walk into a hospital and blindly accept medical advice meant for someone else's body, right? Designed for their unique physiology, their specific ailments. Yet millions of investors effectively do exactly that with their money every single day. They buy when the crowd buys. They panic and sell when the crowd panics, without stopping to ask if the crowd's motivations align with their own long-term goals.
This exposes the fundamental problem Housel calls different games, same field. Think about this simple question. How much would you genuinely pay for one share of Google stock today? The answer isn't purely mathematical. It hinges entirely on your personal timeline, doesn't it? If you intend to hold that stock for the next 30 years, you're going to prioritize long-term fundamentals, growth potential, competitive advantages. But if your plan is to flip that same share by next Friday, all you care about is the next headline, the immediate price swing, the short-term momentum. Now imagine these two individuals, one looking decades ahead, the other focused only on the next 10 minutes, both buying the exact same stock at the exact same price. They are playing completely different games, yet their actions, their buying and selling, directly influence each other's environment. And that's where the real danger emerges, when the wrong people set the price. During the dot-com boom, remember Yahoo stock? It soared to these insane valuations that made zero logical sense for a long-term, value-driven investor, but for the day traders who were just riding these daily momentum waves. That crazy price made perfect sense within their very short-term game. The same unsettling story played out in the housing market leading up to '08. Who really pays $700,000 for a modest little bungalow in Florida? Well, maybe someone who intends to flip it for a quick profit in just 3 months. When these short-term traders flood a market, they effectively set the rules and the price points for everyone else involved. If you, as a long-term investor, blindly follow their lead, you're inadvertently signing up to play a dangerous game that simply isn't yours. You're using their map for your journey. It's basically like setting up a collision course that almost always results in pain for the long-term player. Imagine two runners sprinting directly at each other from opposite ends of a huge field, completely unaware that they're on an inevitable collision path. That, sadly, is often the reality of the market when different types of players interact without understanding each other's motivations. When those paths cross, the long-term investor often bears the brunt of the impact. So the imperative here is absolutely clear. You must know what game you are playing. There isn't a single universal rulebook for investing that applies equally to everyone. Forget that idea. You absolutely have to define your own mission. What are you trying to achieve? What's your timeline? What's your tolerance for risk? My personal mission, for example, Housel shares his own. Mine is something like, I am a passive, long-term investor, deeply optimistic about the world's inherent ability to grow and innovate over the next 30-plus years, and confident that this growth will steadily accrue to my broadly diversified investments. Adopting that clear mission statement changed everything for me. Now, when the market experiences wild spikes or terrifying crashes, I don't flinch as much. I know precisely which game I'm playing, and just as importantly, I know which games I am deliberately not playing. I'm not trying to day trade. I'm not trying to time the market.
And this principle extends far beyond just investing, doesn't it? We constantly compare ourselves to others in everyday life, their clothes, their cars, their seemingly perfect vacations on social media. But we never, ever see the full, unvarnished picture behind the curtain. You don't see the crushing mortgage behind the ostentatious mansion. You don't see the crippling anxiety fueling the flashy sports car purchase. By constantly comparing yourself, you're effectively borrowing someone else's expectations, their definition of success, and then punishing yourself for failing to measure up to their results without ever knowing the true price they paid or the different game they might be playing. Social comparison really is an endless treadmill you can never win.
So figure out what game you are playing, financially, professionally, personally. Then play your game with everything you've got. Focus on your own progress, your own goals. Ruthlessly ignore the incessant noise and the tempting distractions of what everyone else seems to be doing. Guard your own unique goals fiercely. And never ever take your financial cues from someone who doesn't genuinely know your story, your values, or your ultimate mission. Play your own game. There's a really deep-seated reason why fear spreads so much faster, so much more virulently than simple facts. Fear just deftly hijacks your emotions, doesn't it? It often paralyzes your logical thought processes. For millennia, the human brain has been wired not primarily for seeking absolute truth, but for immediate survival. Get through today. And in the context of survival, pessimism inherently possesses this powerful, often compelling edge. Better safe than sorry, right? We live in this strange world where optimism quietly builds empires over decades, yet pessimism consistently grabs all the headlines today. The historian Deirdre McCloskey put it so aptly. She said, "For reasons I have never understood, people like to hear that the world is going to hell. Why is that? Maybe because fear feels inherently protective. Fear, paradoxically, often gives us this false sense of control in a world that feels incredibly uncertain. If I worry enough, maybe I can prevent the bad thing."
Yeah, and it's vital to clarify here. Genuine optimism, the kind Housel talks about, it's not about blind, naive faith, like Pollyanna. Instead, it's a conscious, often data-driven decision to bet on long-term progress, despite the absolute certainty that setbacks, market crashes, wars, pandemics, that chaos is inevitable along the way. It's a profound understanding that, yes, markets will crash, but historically, they also always recover. It's knowing that recessions will come, but so too will incredible innovation and periods of growth. True optimism is believing that tomorrow holds more potential than pain, not because it always will in the short term, but because, historically, over the long arc of time, it usually does. The renowned statistician Hans Rosling, remember him? He once declared, "I am not an optimist, I am a very serious possibilist." It's an approach grounded in data, grounded in what history consistently demonstrates over the long haul.
Think back to December 2008, right in the depths of the global financial crisis. The Wall Street Journal actually published this truly wild forecast from some Russian academic, sensationally predicting that the United States would literally fragment into 6 separate nations. And in that climate of extreme fear, people actually believed it. It seemed plausible because everyone was terrified. Now, contrast that. Imagine trying to predict post-World War II Japan's astonishing economic explosion back when the country was famine-stricken and utterly devastated. If you'd predicted that boom back then, you would have been met with a derisive laughter. Impossible, they'd say.
And this illustrates precisely why we so readily latch on to the worst-case scenarios. Pessimism often sounds intelligent, doesn't it? It sounds urgent. It sounds thoughtful, like you really considered the risks. Or genuine optimism is often dismissed as naive or maybe even irresponsible. Don't you see the dangers?
Raw.
Say the market is going to crash and you'll probably get invited onto CNBC, but suggest that things are slowly, gradually improving. You'll often be accused of having some ulterior motive trying to sell something. And this pervasive psychological bias toward pessimism, it comes at a significant financial cost. Falling prey to those constant doomsday predictions often leads people to miss out entirely on the power of compounding. It leads to panic selling at the absolute worst possible times. It severely interrupts long-term wealth growth. Despite every single major crisis, every war, every pandemic, the U.S. stock market still rose an astonishing 17,000-fold over the last century. The optimistic long-term view paid off massively, despite constant short-term reasons for panic.
This brings us to the idea of the invisible ascent. Progress, you see, it tends to whisper along quietly. Setbacks, however, they scream from the headlines. Explosions make the news tonight. Compounding takes decades to appreciate and goes largely unseen day to day. There are 1,000 overnight tragedies reported, but almost no genuine overnight miracles when it comes to steady, long-term growth. Think about the Wright brothers. Back in 1889, the Detroit Free Press confidently declared that man would never fly, just accept it. Yet the Wright brothers achieved flight just a few years later, and their incredible accomplishment went largely unnoticed by the public for years. Even when people did notice, society struggled to grasp its immense potential beyond being some novelty or maybe a tool for warfare. Progress is often slow, incremental, and incredibly silent in its early stages. Similarly, look at deaths from heart disease in America. They've plummeted by an astounding 70% since 1965. That's an achievement equivalent to saving the entire population of Atlanta every single year. Yet this monumental public health progress largely goes unnoticed because it unfolded quietly, gradually, over many decades. No single dramatic event to report.
Pessimism is just quicker to process, isn't it? It offers this immediate, albeit often fleeting, intellectual satisfaction. See? I told you things were bad. Optimism, on the other hand, demands patience. It demands the ability to perceive the expansive big picture beyond today's scary headlines. And it requires the courage to trust in future growth, even when the present looks bleak. The rewards ultimately accrue to those who can maintain this crucial long-term perspective in a world that is relentlessly, pathologically obsessed with the short term.
Stephen Hawking's profound wisdom really resonates here too. He said, "My expectations were reduced to 0 when I was 21 after his diagnosis. Everything since then has been a bonus." Lowering your expectations can certainly protect you from disappointment, absolutely, but it often simultaneously robs you of momentum, ambition, and the very dreams that fuel innovation and progress. So, what will you choose? Do you aspire to be the smartest person in the room, constantly predicting the end of the world? Or will you be the quiet one, diligently building the future that everyone else was too paralyzed by fear to even believe in? Bet on human ingenuity, bet on enduring progress, bet on unwavering patience, profound resilience, and quiet courage. That's usually the winning long-term strategy. Okay, imagine an impartial alien observer watching Earth. They watched the New Year's Eve festivities at the end of 2007, then again at the end of 2009. From a purely physical perspective, the world was demonstrably better in 2009. Cities were more advanced, machines more powerful, our collective scientific knowledge had expanded. Yet during that short 2-year span, U.S. households became $16 trillion poorer and 10 million more people were unemployed. Why? Physically, things were better. So what changed? Housel's answer, simply, the story changed. In 2007, we collectively told ourselves this comforting narrative: housing prices never go down nationwide, big banks are infallible, markets are inherently rational and self-correcting. By 2009, that collective belief system had utterly collapsed, confidence shattered. That dramatic shift in the narrative we believed, not some technological failure or unforeseen war, triggered a profound financial earthquake. That, my friends, is how fragile prosperity can truly be. It rests heavily on the stories we tell ourselves.
This point is absolutely critical, isn't it? The narratives we choose to believe, individually and collectively, fundamentally determine whether we fully harness our human capacity for growth and innovation, or whether we suppress it out of paralyzing fear. When collective belief collapses, reality, regrettably, often follows suit with devastating speed. The story dictates the outcome.
And this highlights the seductive power of appealing fictions, stories we want to be true. Think about that old woman Housel mentions on Armistice Day in 1918, declaring with tears in her eyes, "No more wars ever again," only for World War II to erupt a mere 21 years later. That is the inherent danger of desperately wanting something to be true so badly that you willfully ignore inconvenient realities, uncomfortable truths. Desperation, tragically, is often a powerful catalyst for belief. Housel tells the story of Ali Haji, whose son was dying in Yemen. Ali Haji said, "When you have no money and your son is sick, you'll believe anything, even, apparently, in the efficacy of a burning stick cure. Desperation makes you grasp at straws, at stories."
And Daniel Defoe's Chronicles of Londoners frantically buying infallible preventative pills during the Great Plague back in 1722. It perfectly mirrors our modern behavior, doesn't it? Today, people are glued to financial pundits on TV, uncritically following advice from YouTubers, investing life savings in highly speculative meme coins based on online hype. When the stakes feel astronomically high, when fear or greed takes hold, raw emotion consistently trumps cold logic. We latch onto the story that promises the outcome we crave. Hope itself can become a significant hazard in finance. When the belief that a particular stock will multiply 10x becomes deeply intertwined with your personal identity or your sense of belonging to a particular online tribe, you start to ignore objective odds. You stop asking those crucial, hard, skeptical questions. We know that a staggering 85% of actively managed mutual funds consistently underperform their simple benchmark indexes over time. Yet trillions of dollars remain invested in them. Why? Because people cling to the story, the belief that their next manager will miraculously be the next Warren Buffett. Bernie Madoff's impossibly smooth, consistent returns were just too good, too appealing a story, to genuinely question for many sophisticated investors. The narrative was too comforting.
Even the biggest, most respected financial institutions are susceptible to this narrative bias. The Federal Reserve, for instance, with all its PhD economists and complex models, confidently predicted modest economic growth in 2007-2008. The stark reality, as we know, was a severe, painful contraction. Why the myth? Well, partly because no one in a position of power genuinely wants to predict something really bad. It's an unappealing story to tell. This profound human craving for the comfort of control inevitably leads us into the danger of illusion. Housel uses the example of his 1-year-old daughter. She constructs a complete narrative from very incomplete information. Dad left the room, therefore I am sad. It makes sense to her, even if it's not the full picture. We as adults often do precisely the same thing in our financial lives. We create neat stories to explain chaotic events, giving ourselves a false sense of understanding.
We instinctively crave that illusion of understanding, don't we? That comforting belief that the world is fundamentally predictable, that we could figure it out if we just have enough data. But reality, especially financial reality, is inherently messy. It's governed by profound uncertainty, randomness, and surprise. This deep-seated craving for order leads us to construct narratives that primarily soothe our anxiety, rather than narratives that accurately reflect the complex, often unknowable truth. And the cost of this false confidence is strikingly clear. NASA operates with the beautiful precision of astrophysics. Finance, conversely, operates in a murky realm of probability, human emotion, mass psychology, and constant surprise. Hindsight cunningly tricks us into believing the world was always understandable, that the crash was obvious after the fact. But the overwhelming majority of financial predictions fail precisely because the future is not just a continuation of the past.
So maybe the most practical advice here is stop believing everything you think, especially the stories that feel too neat, too simple, too reassuring. Ruthlessly question any narrative that feels too perfect, too convenient, especially when your own money or future is on the line. The greatest financial wisdom isn't found in claiming to know everything. It's found in truly humbly understanding how much you don't know and how much is simply unknowable. The precise moment you humbly accept how little ultimate control you truly possess over external events, that's often the very moment you begin to genuinely take control of what you can control. Your own behavior, your savings rate, your reactions, your entire financial future depends profoundly on what you choose to do after you courageously admit what you don't know. Don't navigate the fog with a map based on wishful thinking. #tag conclusion and recommendations. The path forward. Okay, as we start to wrap up this deep dive into the psychology of money, I'm reminded of this really jarring story Housel tells about Clarence Hughes back in 1931. Hughes went to the dentist seeking pain relief. He was knocked unconscious with anesthetic and awoke to find the dentist had brutally extracted 16 of his teeth. 16. He had never consented to that. His wife sued, not because he died or anything, but because his fundamental autonomy, his right to choose, was utterly violated. He was never even asked. And Housel makes this brilliant point. Giving blanket, one-size-fits-all financial advice without deeply understanding your unique values, your goals, your fears, it's kind of like pulling teeth without asking. There is no single universal financial truth that works for everyone. There's only what profoundly matters to you. As the legendary investor Sandy Gottsman apparently used to ask his clients, what do you own and why? That simple question. It's a mirror. It forces you to reflect on your deepest priorities, your actual motivations.
Yeah, and what's truly revealing there is Dr. Ken Murray's observation about doctors. He noticed that doctors frequently choose vastly different end-of-life care for themselves than they typically recommend to their patients. They often prioritize quality of life over mere quantity of days, which demonstrates that when life or money becomes intensely personal, decisions often stop being purely rational based on statistics and instead become profoundly real based on values and emotions.
So here's my own confession, inspired by Housel's closing thoughts. I don't personally spend my time relentlessly chasing the absolute highest possible investment returns, nor do I try to constantly outsmart the market. I invest primarily in a way that allows me to sleep deeply at night, to love my family boldly, and to reliably show up for the people who need me most without financial stress dictating my choices. That, for me, is what truly works. That's my why. So, as you leave this deep dive today, here are maybe a few key ideas from the book worth carrying with you. 1. Respect the profound power of time and compounding. Every single dollar you save today is like a dedicated soldier tirelessly working for your future self. Start small if you need to, but please, start now. Delay in the world of compounding is incredibly expensive over the long run. 2, actively define what enough genuinely looks like for you. The world, the advertisers, social media, they will perpetually push you to acquire more, achieve more, compare more. By clearly defining your own unique finish line, you can avoid that soul-crushing trap of working a job you despise merely to fund a lifestyle you don't even truly want or need. 3, meticulously build a robust margin of safety everywhere in your life. Consistently expect things to go wrong because they inevitably will. An emergency fund isn't just a safety net, it's like impenetrable armor. Maintaining cash reserves isn't a sign of fear, it's a source of immense strength, calm, and invaluable options when chaos hits. 4, cultivate a long-term optimistic but short-term realist or even paranoid mindset. History overwhelmingly rewards patience and enduring optimism about human progress. But that patience will be tested relentlessly. Expect brutal financial winters. Resolve beforehand to not flinch or panic when they inevitably arrive. 5, steadfastly avoid extremes in both your money and your life. Balance, while often perceived as boring or unexciting, is inherently resilient. Extremes tend to generate fleeting headlines and dramatic stories, but they rarely build enduring legacies or sustainable peace of mind. 6, understand that true wealth is often what you don't see. It is silent. It's often invisible to the outside world. It's the luxurious car you deliberately chose not to buy, the extravagant vacation you judiciously delayed, the lifestyle upgrades you wisely opted not to pursue, choosing savings instead. True wealth is freedom, and freedom, by its very nature, doesn't need to post pictures on Instagram. In my own family, our financial philosophy is deeply rooted in these kinds of principles. Savings for us are fundamentally about achieving and maintaining independence, not about funding indulgence. My dad, for instance, was able to transition out of a demanding medical career at 60 with this quiet confidence that stemmed directly from decades of disciplined saving. It was a legacy of independence he built, not one of ostentatious spending. We consciously try to live below our means to anchor our lifestyle and prevent that insidious lifestyle creep where expenses rise to meet income. We diligently build what we call an independence fund. We also own our home outright. Now, on paper, mathematically, that might not always be the absolute optimal financial strategy given mortgage rates sometimes, but for us, the profound emotional independence it provides, the security, is priceless. We also consistently keep about 20% of our assets in cash or near cash equivalents. Why? To anticipate those metaphorical field mice, the unexpected job loss, the medical crisis, the leaky roof, thus avoiding the painful necessity of selling long-term investments during market downturns when prices are low. And for investing, our approach is really defined by simplicity, unwavering discipline, and the relentless pursuit of freedom. I personally shifted years ago from trying to pick individual stocks to investing primarily in low-cost, broadly diversified index funds. My goal isn't ego-driven. It's not about trying to beat the market to prove how smart I am. It's purely about achieving and preserving freedom over the long term. Our three core principles are pretty simple. Maintain an uncommonly high savings rate, cultivate unshakable patience through all market weather, and hold a deeply ingrained long-term optimism in the future of global progress and innovation. We don't feel the need to predict recessions. We simply commit to consistently showing up and sticking to the plan.
And just to quickly contextualize where many of us find ourselves today, it's incredibly helpful to briefly understand the recent history of the American consumer, which Housel touches on. The post-World War II era saw this seismic shift in America, right? Transforming from a wartime economy focused on production and sacrifice to a powerful consumer-driven one focused on spending. There was this palpable fear of sliding back into another Great Depression, coupled with a massive housing crisis, a job crisis for returning GIs, and the baby boom demographic explosion. The government responded with these bold, sweeping initiatives. Mass-produced housing like Levittown, the incredibly transformative GI Bill offering education and mortgages, huge infrastructure investments, all designed to build confidence and stimulate demand.
And crucially, interest rates were kept artificially low for about 7 years after WWII. That made borrowing almost irresistible. The GI Bill offered near-free mortgages. The modern consumer credit economy, buy now, pay later, was essentially born in that era. The message was simple and pervasive. Spend. It's your patriotic duty to keep the economy going.
Right. And the hidden, often overlooked forces from the Great Depression and the war had inadvertently spurred immense innovation, and productivity factories were running at peak efficiency. Assembly lines perfected. Post-war, this huge pent-up consumer demand, combined with this explosion of productive capacity, fueled an unprecedented boom in cars, homes, appliances, everything. Progress that had been brewing in the dark suddenly burst forth into the light.
And really critically for that era, America truly seemed to prosper together. From roughly 1940 to 1963, average wages doubled twice, and the gains were broadly and equitably shared across the income spectrum. A bottom 20% of earners saw their incomes grow at roughly the same impressive rate as the top 5%. Income inequality actually reduced significantly during that period. Americans used the same brands of razors, watched the same 3 TV networks, drove similar kinds of cars. It fostered this powerful sense of shared experience, shared prosperity, a true middle-class nation.
However, by around 1973, distinct cracks started to appear in that foundation. Unemployment surged, inflation went wild, remember stagflation, interest rates climbed dramatically. Public trust in institutions eroded amidst political assassinations, the Vietnam War, Watergate. Global competition intensified, especially from Japan and later China. And the baby boomer generation, who inherited this unprecedented prosperity, arguably didn't experience the same formative pain and hardship that had forged their parents' resilience and maybe financial conservatism.
This created this deep emotional fracture, didn't it? Expectations, which had been rising steadily for decades, didn't reset downwards when the economy slowed. That ingrained belief that an average middle-class income automatically guaranteed a comfortable, good life started to unravel. The widening gap between those ingrained expectations and the harsher economic reality fueled widespread resentment, anxiety, a feeling that the ladder was being pulled up. The economic game had fundamentally changed, making it increasingly difficult for the average person to get ahead just by working hard and playing by the old rules.
And while the Reagan boom in the 80s did see the economy roar back to life, in many ways the S&P 500 surged, GDP grew, jobs were created. This new era of growth was profoundly lopsided. Wealth and income became increasingly concentrated at the very top. Housel cites data showing between 1993 and 2012, the top 1% of earners saw their income surge by over 86%, while the remaining 99% experienced a much more modest 6.6% gain over that same period.
So as a select few pulled dramatically ahead, the vast majority of people felt this immense pressure to stretch, to desperately try and keep up appearances. Housel uses the example of Peter, maybe a bank manager earning $80,000, constantly seeing his neighbor Joe, an investment banker, making $1 million. Peter feels pressured to emulate Joe's lifestyle, taking on massive mortgages, maxing out credit cards, carrying huge student loans, trying to live someone else's financial reality. Household debt just exploded during this period, soaring from maybe 60% of income ratio in the early 80s to a staggering 130% by 2007, right before the crash.
And this established paradigm, this way of thinking, it doesn't just die quietly. Even post-2008, after some debt was shed and interest rates plunged, policies like quantitative easing arguably disproportionately inflated asset prices again, primarily benefiting those who already owned assets, the wealthiest 10%. Tax policy continued to often tilt towards the wealthy, the very idea of a broad, thriving middle class defined by shared prosperity. For many people today, that feels like an outdated dream, a nostalgic relic of a bygone era.
And this ongoing dynamic, this feeling of being left behind or stuck, has led to this collective, resonant cry from different parts of the political spectrum. This isn't working. Movements like the Tea Party, Occupy Wall Street, Brexit, the rise of Donald Trump, all vastly different ideologies, right? Yet arguably all united by the same underlying message from their supporters. The current system is failing me. It's not working for my family. I feel unseen. It reflects profound inequality, deeply frayed trust, and this pervasive feeling of being left out of the progress narrative. But progress, we must remember, is often cyclical. Today, wages for the lowest earners are rising again. Unemployment is low by historical standards. But those deeply ingrained expectations formed over decades often lag far behind the changing reality. So this deep dive has really tried to explore how people genuinely think about money, those often invisible psychological forces that relentlessly shape our financial decisions, and the powerful historical currents that collectively molded the modern American consumer and the landscape we navigate today. The world we live in now undeniably offers unprecedented opportunities for wealth creation and connection, but it simultaneously demands unparalleled awareness, discipline, and intentionality from each of us. Your true wealth, remember, is not the car you drive or the house you own. It's the money you consciously haven't spent. It's the priceless options you've diligently preserved. It's the secure future you've bravely protected for yourself and your loved ones. The most dangerous financial move you can make is not losing money in a market downturn. It's living a life dictated entirely by someone else's definition of success, chasing their dreams instead of your own. Be profoundly informed, be fiercely intentional, and resolutely be the one holding the pen, writing your own unique financial story, because ultimately it's not merely about the money itself, it's about the extraordinary life you get to live because of the choices you make with it. Hashtag outro. So, wrapping up. In a world that is constantly, relentlessly screaming for more, choosing to define and embrace what is enough for you, that is a truly radical and powerful act. In a world utterly obsessed with speed and instant gratification, cultivating patience, letting time work its magic, that is your most potent superpower. And in a world overflowing with financial noise, conflicting advice, and tempting comparisons, the quiet, unwavering strength of knowing and playing your own game is absolutely everything.
History, for all its chaotic twists and turns, consistently teaches us that change is the only true constant. But it also teaches us that within every challenge, within every period of disruption and uncertainty, lies an inherent opportunity, an opportunity to innovate, to rebuild, perhaps even stronger, and to ultimately thrive. By harnessing knowledge, like the insights in this book, and foresight, you really can forge new, resilient pathways to your own version of prosperity. Embrace that profound resilience.
So I'll leave you with this question to mull over. What story are you actively writing with your money right now, today? Are you diligently building a future where you are rich in freedom, rich in choices, rich in peace of mind? Or are you perhaps chasing an elusive mirage, someone else's definition of success that will never truly satisfy you? Will you allow fear and comparison to dictate your financial decisions? Or will you bravely take the reins, guided by reason and your own values, and confidently run your future? The clock, my friend, is ticking, and your future self is patiently waiting for your answer. If this deep dive has ignited your curiosity, I really urge you. Continue to question, continue to learn, continue to grow. Because truly understanding the psychology of money isn't the end goal. It's just the beginning of embarking on a more peaceful, powerful, and ultimately a more fulfilling financial life.